Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. My name is Robbi Astral, and welcome to Robbi Tech. Today we've got an interesting product for a review, overview / setup guide and benchmarking results of what is essentially a PCIe adapter card, and I'm sure you're aware of what it is. It's in the title. So without a moment's rest, let's get that product up on the table. So what we have here is our Hyper M.2 x16 card version 2, produced by ASUS, compatible with ASUS motherboards that are compatible. So if you're interested, by all means listen in. If you're thinking about buying one, then I'm glad you're here because you haven't bought it yet. Listen to my advice and you won't go astray. If you've already bought one and you're trying to work out why it's not working, I might be able to shed some light as to why that is the case as well, in turn providing you with a better knowledge and understanding of what's going on and how to approach it in your experience. Because today I will be discussing this card through my own experience and the pitfalls I had and the elation I received once I got it working. It's got the potential, this card, for transfer of up to 128 gigabits per second. It's not to say that you're going to be able to utilize that with NVMe's from Gen 3, but keeping that in mind, our SATA 6 gigabits a second transfer rates are something that your SSDs, for example, are running on, and for 128 gigabits a second, that's a massive amount, because it goes into your PCIe slots, so where your graphics card goes, and you've got your by 4, your by 8, and your by 16. Your by 4, I believe, is 32 gigabits, so it's a multiple of 4 on that one, and it's the potential for very, very fast read and write speeds as well. So just to reiterate what may have caused you to come here as well, this is where you'll find that you'll be able to get, if done so correctly, Gen 4 speeds at Gen 3 prices. Okay? And if you are excited at the potential of something like that, if you're thinking about Gen 4 and that you missed out, then a card like this, if your motherboard is compatible, may be a great purchase in the meantime. You may be running low on space and want to improve your computer's performance. You may be a video editor or do a lot of rendering tasks and heavy workloads utilizing assets coming from your hard drives. Okay? It may even help if you can put this into a PlayStation, old school gen, or an Xbox, then definitely Cyberpunk will run faster, or supposedly. But it's a limiting factor, that on a side note, of a lot of other things why Cyberpunk ain't running, and we're not getting into Cyberpunk today, frankly. Maybe another day, if the game's still got any interest. Okay, but if you're excited about getting these potential speeds, which we haven't exactly gone into, I've got the benchmarks already, surprisingly, then please hit the like, follow, and or subscribe button. The socials will be positioned at the top of the page for the duration of the video. Also, in the description, you will find the links, and timestamps should also be there, along with the links to the applicable manuals and whatnot that you may require. So please show your appreciation to Robbi Tech, and as a result, I am greatly appreciative of all the support that you guys give us. It's free to both like, follow, and subscribe, and it just gives me the ammunition to continue to create content like this, and I'll better myself and produce better content in turn for you all. So without a moment's further rest, let's have a look at least at what's in the box. So first things first, Hyper M.2 card version 2. Open it up like so. We're greeted with anti-static bag. Pops out, I'll pop that over there, we know what it is. I'll have a look underneath. Quick start guide, you will need that. And my receipt. Now my receipt, I paid approximately just under $100 for this item Australian over a year ago now, a year and a half ago. It, in conjunction with the NVMe's that I needed, was rather pricey. NVMe's that I've utilized, I apologize, where are they? Let me just turn around here and grab those. The 970 Evo Plus Samsung NVMe's. They are Gen 3, understand, but we're gonna combine these to both produce one singular drive. They're all 500 gigabytes, the 4 of them. And in theory, we could get a terabyte drive, or in my case, in my experience, I could only utilize 3 of them to get a 1.5 terabyte drive, along with speeds of potential. The general speeds on these are read and write sequential speeds of 3500 megabits a second. So in theory, with 2 of them, it should double the speed. With 4 of them, it would double it again. But in my case, there's only 3 of them. So applicable numbers, I'll let you do the maths, because in real world applications and whatnot, those figures may not translate exactly. You know, just like with any benchmarking and whatnot, you want to make sure that the system's on completely idle and a clean install and whatnot, with all the correct drivers, with everything updated, including Windows and whatnot, to make sure that those tests are as consistent as possible and that nothing's interfering as well in the background, even at the very least. So I'll just show you simple benchmarks at the end. If you want to see the performance, then hit the timestamp on the bottom and it'll take you straight to what you expect to get out of this if you're confident enough to get into it. But otherwise, listen in and we'll get through it together. So what's in the anti-static bag, essentially? Now I apologize if I look left, right, back, forward. Everything's in a slightly different place now, and as a result, I feel like a headless chicken. Look at what we have here. We've got the ASUS drive, or I beg your pardon, the adapter card, your PCIe adapter card, your Hyper M.2 x16 card. I don't know why I'm reading it, probably because I'm nervous and I'm forgetting everything. I sort of did that with tests as well when I was a kid. It's like all of a sudden I forgot everything I studied because I'm just freaking out. But yeah, now to be brutally honest, I just want to say one major thing. There's a switch on the back that powers the fan that's inside that cools the NVMe's. Just make sure that's on. It's labeled on and off. Very easy. Some are 4 LEDs to signify the operation of the NVMe drives in the 4 slots available on the inside. It does have a massive heat sink, quite hefty. When you open it up, there is a circle just here where the fan is. It goes places in, and it intakes here, and goes over the NVMe drives, which are in parallel, and exits by the rear port, just like your rear exhaust does. I'm not going to open it. In fact, I'll just scroll through some pictures so that you guys can see how to open it. Your quick start guide is your point of call regarding this aspect of installing the NVMe's in there. If you're not confident enough of doing and looking at something like that and doing it yourself, then you probably shouldn't be here at this time. What am I saying? English, please. 4 screws. We'll take off the heatsink. You'll be greeted with one side that's got the thermal pads on it. Don't forget that you've got the peels on those thermal pads. Other side's got the fan, as well as the 4 slots, which are numbered from 1 to 4. Okay, it will take varying lengths of M.2 NVMe's. Just make sure you have a look at the specifications first before you go out and purchase those. But generally speaking, your standard lengths are accompanied, just providing that you've got a Gen 3 NVMe. Okay, hopefully that doesn't fall. Let me grab a bit of coffee because we're going to get into it. So you've gone through the quick start guide and you've installed the NVMe's accordingly. Before we get to that, I'm going to delve into my experience. I could only get 3 of them that would be compatible with my motherboard. My motherboard was an ASUS Z390F motherboard that's accompanied with an i7 9700K, 99 i9s, 9900Ks and whatnot. Will be compatible as well with this card. It depends upon the motherboard that you have specifically and whether you'll be able to, or you're willing to, is the other question, run the 4 of them. 4 drives require a by 16 slot. 3 drives in my case only required a by 8 PCIe slot. On my motherboard per se, when I populated the second PCIe slot, so the slots are where the graphics cards go, for example. When I occupied the second slot, it means that the first slot will become from 16 a by 8 slot and would allow for by 8 power as well to the second slot. For my purposes, that was enough to power my graphics card adequately and perform well. Still, the graphics card that's in the system is an RTX 2070 and I lost approximately 5, no more than 10 frames depending on the application or the game, should I say. So I wasn't too fussed about that. Of course, what I did was I overclocked the card as well. So I sort of gained it back in that regards, you know. But that then left me with the by 8 slot on the second row, and very easily all you have to do is connect it up and put it in there like a graphics card, and it's much easier, frankly, to install compared to a large bulky graphics card getting it into that slot, because it lines up very easily. One thing in my case, since I could only use 3, and it'll be the case for anyone regarding this, remember this is the Gen 3 one, there is a Gen 4 one out as well. The population of the NVMe's and where they go may vary, but in my case the second slot was left absent, so slots 1, 3 and 4 were filled, and that's how it works. It's as simple as that. It's in the instruction set I believe. If not, it's definitely on the website where you find the motherboard capabilities. Look, before we continue, it's in one of those, but what you need to do is you need to go to the corresponding product page for the HyperCard and download the RAID configuration support manual pertaining to it. Also the specific manual pertaining to it. You can get also the quick start guide pertaining to it. You will require your own manual as well, because that has further information on the cards, and the card is obviously sold separately. On a detour, before we continue forward, I just want to say I've seen a lot of videos on this topic that have been inaccurate in their portrayal. Whether it's user error or not is a question I haven't had completely answered on some of the shammy video reviews and setup guides on this. I've seen people that struggle to get it working and they don't know why it's the case. I've seen motherboards that should have it working completely fully compatible and it's not, and their reasoning just does not make sense. They say things that are similar to myself, maybe even sound more articulately posed, but or they give you a, I don't know, cleaner image. I don't want to name or shame, but on this side note, just understand that I won't, like I said, lead you astray. And if you go through this video, you'll have a comprehensive understanding of what's going on. So we've got our 3 drives in the card. I'm not going to show you step by step on how to actually go by installing it. And if you'd like to know why, it's because currently out of these 4 drives, I required 2 of them. I wasn't in a position to buy them, but I did need them for my other rig, which is my editing and streaming rig. So I took the other 2 from it and I increased the capacity of my boot drive to 1 terabyte. I did a RAID array, RAID 0, to increase that capacity on the 2 NVMe's on the motherboard, which are now on the motherboard. That took out 2 250 gigabyte NVMe's, which I use as externals. And then I took the other 2 which I required and did the same for the 3900 XT system, which I built last year. That's under the desk, guys. That's a workhorse. That's overclocked. That's overclocked. I might get into overclock. It's a good time that if you got these CPUs, you may be feeling deflated because of the 5000 series and that you've just sort of got yourself new computers or whatnot. Understand that if you like, perhaps leave a comment below. I can show you guys how to effectively overclock these if necessary. At the moment, I've got an all-day overclock on the 97K. It's only 5 gigahertz on all cores. I've had it up to 5.3. We're right now in the middle of summer, and the ambient temperatures aren't good in this room. So as a result, it's a dial back clock with an undervolt. On top of that, the Ryzen is, I believe, it's 12 cores and 24 threads. And it's running at just under 4.5 gigahertz on a manual overclock on all cores. It's a lucky chip, so you don't want to replicate it. It's been undervolted as well. It's approximately 1.3 volts. For example, I'm not going to get into this topic too much, but just understand that I can comprehensively show you a path to help you overclock your PCs as well. I won't just give you the the numbers that you input, because for everyone those numbers will be different, but I can teach you how to get to those numbers, because essentially doing an overclock properly, it's pretty much trial and error over a period of time, understanding what you're doing and doing it in minute steps and coming back to it and going forward again. And you just creep up to eventually you get to that stable overclock where you can't go any further and you're happy with the temperatures and whatnot. And yeah, you gain those performances out of it as a result. From overclocking, you can see considerable performance gains. Yeah, if you're interested in something like that, just leave me a comment in the comments below. I'll endeavor to look through them all. Otherwise, I believe on our Facebook channel, I'm more inclined to answer questions there. And we do, it's like a sister site now to the YouTube channel. So have a look at that at Robbi Tech also on Facebook. And there you've got the luxury of asking questions, which I get notifications on instantly. On YouTube, I find that if there's a lot of comments, it's very difficult to get to everyone in a timely fashion. But there I've got the ability to go through that. And also, I'll be greatly appreciated that you've signed up to or subscribed to a couple of our channels at the very least. Thank you. So the card, in my case, we've got 3 NVMe's in there. We will be setting it up in RAID array or RAID array RAID 0. This, to reiterate, increases both the storage capacity of the drive by combining them into one drive. Understand that these need to be identical drives. It's not always the case, but if they're not, then the combination of the drives will be a multiple of the lowest space drive. So if you've got a 500, a 500 and a 250 and you want to combine those, unfortunately you're going to have a maximum drive capacity of 750 gigabytes. In our case, the 3 of them are all the same, 500 gigabyte drives, and that will give us a 1.5 terabyte drive therein, minus a little bit. Now, to do the RAID, you're going to have your RAID configuration guide is going to be a godsend. There's only actually, specifically in this case, 3 or 4 steps that you have to do in the BIOS EPI. It's actually an EPI nowadays, but we can still call it the BIOS. Yeah, so what I'll do is, unfortunately, since I can't show you, I will go through that instruction set with you and explain what exactly is going on and what you're doing at that stage that you're looking at those steps. Okay, guys? So bear with me 1 second. I'll change the image and we'll get into that. Alrighty, so we've made it this far. The card is slotted into the applicable slot where you should be aware of the bandwidth that's you're going to get and where to plug it into your motherboard specifically. Now let's go through the steps. So first things first, you're going to type in Hyper M.2 x16 card version 2, take you to the ASUS.com website. We'll go to the US one. It was slightly different to the Australian one. I always go to the Australian one just in case there's product differentials or anything through the manufacturing process and regional base or anything like that. Sometimes it's the case. So just quickly, you've got the card here and that's it opened up. So you can see clear as day. Fan here, it's a bit pissy, the fan, frankly. You do have some other PCIe adapter cards that have really bulky fans. For example, from the Creator board series you used to get on the MSI range, you used to get a free one that almost looks like a, I don't know, 1660 Ti or something. It's got a, like with a single fan sort of thing, that's massive. But the heatsink correspondingly comes apart there. Have a look at the other side, for example. Closer inspection over here shows the fan switch which I was referring to. Make sure it's on the on switch. Stylish sync pending your flavors that you like. And also the M.2 NVMe's ×4. So number 1 starts from the furthest away or the closest part to you, depending on where you're looking. That part connects obviously to where the graphics board is in that sense. And then goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and it takes your 2242, 2260s, 2280s, and 22110 variants of your Gen 3 NVMe's. Okay, so we'll close that. When you go into that page on the ASUS website for the motherboard specific Hyper M.2 x16 card version 2, from the search screen it'll take you to the asus.com motherboards components page, and it'll take you straight here. Otherwise you will have to search for the component. Make sure it's the M.2 x16 card version 2 for Gen 3. I generally use the Australian website for any ASUS products first before I have to go anywhere else, just in case something's regionally different. It's generally not the case, but just in case, it's just what I do. And you'll scroll down. You will start off in frequently asked questions, more likely. Hit manual and documents. You will need the Hyper M.2 x16 card RAID configuration guide users manual. Make sure it's the newest dated one. Download that. Also, Hyper M.2 x16 cards V2 users manual in English, but go with the most applicable newest one, just like you do with drivers and BIOSes generally speaking. And once you've got those, so one of them, your ASUS Hyper M.2 x16 card version 2 quick start guide. So this is what is in the case as well. It should be. This is why this might be a newer version that might be more applicable. So it supports data transfer rates of up to 128 gigabits a second, as mentioned by myself previously. PCI Express 3.0 x16 interface, so PCI Express x8 and x16 compatible with PCI Express x8 and x16 slots. Okay, but the thing is, it supports certain configurations and certain amounts of NVMe based on your motherboards, and that's where you want to go to asus.com for the latest compatible model lists. Okay, so there's a link here, so we're going to do that right now. You're forced to get it to this page, and there's a link to support to see a full compatible list and further information. Hopefully finally this takes us to that page. Okay, so here we go. So compatibility, motherboard compatibility of PCIe bifurcation between Hyper M.2 series cards and add-on graphics cards. So also, there are restrictions and configurations for M.2 SSD installation restrictions. Update to the latest BIOS before using RAID on CPU function. For Z390 and Z370 series motherboards, install IRST version 16 or above to use RAID on CPU function. Only Intel SSDs can active Intel RAID on CPU function in an Intel platform. In my experience, for example, my Z3 motherboard did a 3 graphics RAID array, and they weren't Intel, 3 NVMe RAID array for RAID 0, and they weren't Intel SSDs or anything. So understand that it will work in that regards. Okay, depending on your X299 series motherboards, that's where any Intel SSDs can activate Intel VROC function in the Intel platform. This is where you want to be careful, okay, because this is your Hyper M.2 x16 Gen 4 card. So it's your Gen 4 card, and as you can see, they're aligned differently. I've got a feeling that these cards should be backwards compatible, but that's something that you should check if you're thinking about upgrading sooner rather than later, and you got some old NVMe's lying about, but you've got a Gen 4 boards. I've got, and this applies to both AMD as well, I believe, ASUS boards as well as Intel. Then double check that. There's a chance that these will be backwards compatible. Here it shows you when one SSD is populated, you put it into the first slot. When two are populated, you put it into the first and the second. When three are populated, you put it into the first, third and fourth, and that's the same with the Gen 3 board. Okay, and when four are populated, you got them all in there. Okay, so when I refer to my slots, for example, if we use this motherboard as an example, you've got your first slot, your second slot, and your third slot, and typically the additional ones in between are by 1 slots. Okay, my first slots are by 16, and as soon as I populate the second slot, they become 2 by 8 slots. That's still a 4-point slot. So for example, you could get essentially, if you want an additional storage device and you've got a big NVMe, because it's not worth it with a small one realistically, unless you just got them lying around, you can get a $20 adapter that's similar to this and plug it in. And then also potentially you can get a dual one, and if you've got an old one and you're upgrading, you can get your old 860 NVMe's, I believe, and that will also connect up to your SATA connection as well, and you'll have it running. So you can definitely overpopulate these, but I didn't need times 16 because times 16 I couldn't operate without a graphics card, so that wasn't even a notion to try. So I had my graphics card populated in the top slot, and in the second slot I had that card inserted, not this card but the one with the the horizontal positioning. Now if we go back to the compatibility, now the problem is you might have to do a bit more shifting. The weird thing is that if we look for Rockstrix Z390F, it's right here. Okay, gaming. So compatibility of PCIe, maximum M.2 SSD support will be varied depending on your different CPUs as well. So your maximum number of your M.2 SSD support will vary, depends on different CPU specs and PCIe it should be bifurcation settings in different ASUS motherboards. I always say that word so wrongly. So as you can see again, this is the version 2, okay? You scroll down, it's got the link, it will take you to that. So it's not that I'm going to the wrong page, but it's just for confusion, they got the Gen 4 board there. That's why I'm saying there's a massive chance that it's backwards compatible, and it might be a consideration, but it is more expensive as well, okay? Just like anything when you think about it logically, just like for example RAM, you can downclock it and whatnot. It's not necessarily the same, but the ports themselves are exactly the same. It's just the speeds which have changed, okay? So it's just like RAM, that's a higher speed, and you can in theory downclock it. Okay, so once you've got that, we'll go back to what you downloaded previously, and that was your RAID configuration guide, quick start guide. We can pop the quick start guide aside now, and we can get into the RAID configuration. So just on a side note, if you're interested, there are other forms of RAID arrays that you can configure, not necessarily regarding the utilization of these PCIe adapter cards, but if you're interested, there's a RAID 0, it's called a striping, so data striping, and it's got a little definition here that re-explains in sort of less layman terms or better articulated language what I explained earlier to you. Identical hard disk drives to read and write data in a parallel interleaved stacks. Two hard disks perform the same work as a single drive, but at sustained data transfer rate, double that of a single disk alone, thus improving, that's only two of them, remember, thus improving data access and storage. Use of the two identical hard drives is required for this setup. It might not be the case, okay? Trust me, I've tried weirder shit before that and I've made it work. You will also need your motherboard manual. I always double check mine actual manual I received to that of the manuals online. They also have different editions. Sometimes there's relevant information, sometimes you just want to read, the new stuff will conflict that information that's literally in your motherboard, or vice versa for that matter. So here's my motherboard, by the way, a few years old now. Support, manual and document. Obviously you've got your hard copy as well. Sometimes it's more user friendly to use that, other times it's not. So I'm going to download that. Again, when you scroll down, in this case, there's a RAID configuration guide user's manual in English. Okay, I'm noting that it's a different version. Okay, keeping that in mind, I might have it downloaded because date wise it's actually 1 month further in, so this is something newer. Again, I've come to this through putting in my motherboard specifications or title and gone to the motherboard page. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. There are many iterations and you're going to find stuff that is, if we have a look at it, in theory, if we just look at the contents, they're exactly the same. So what they've changed in there, who the hell knows, but wait, 14794, 14794, they are the same. So different spot, same outcome. So what we have here then is our Rockstrix Z90F gaming manual. So in my case, you've got a section that's NVMe configuration. Pretty comprehensive this. The NVMe configuration, this menu displays the NVMe controller and drive information of the connected devices. So once you've connected, you'll want to check whether they are connected and available as drives. They should be read and registered. Then from there, we've also got our BIOS manual specifically. And what you have to do, you have to essentially flick the on switch for the Hyper M.2 adapter. So what we have here is the NVMe configuration. The menu displays the NVMe control and drive information of the connected devices, and your driver should come up here essentially. It says here no NVMe devices found. If that's the case, it might be because your Hyper M.2 drive has not been connected per se, or enabled. There's a setting where you have to make sure that you enable that. Okay, once enabled, you will be able to, you want to go to advanced CPU storage configuration. So advanced settings, CPU storage configuration, then select all the corresponding PCIe slots to Hyper M.2 x 16. But what you'll actually be doing is just enabling the Hyper M.2 cards sold separately. You'll just be enabling the card, I believe, in this position, in this place, okay? It's just a simple enable Hyper M.2, it's off, you click it on, and then you make sure that it's going in the second slot by 8, you know, if there's any information relevant to that, depending on your BIOS and whatnot. From there, what you have to do is you have to go into create RAID volume, and you're going to name it. You're going to do the RAID level, so it's a RAID 0 stripe. You're going to see then the enabled drives that are available to you. Make sure you're aware if you have more other drives, make sure, because I had other NVMe 500 gig drives in there and it was a little confusing. Make sure you know which are which, okay? And or make sure that you're sure of that, because you don't want to suddenly say delete the boot drive, which might have the operating system on it. And then you're going to select the X on those drives, okay? Stripe size, by default for RAID 0, it's 128 kilobits, okay? So understand, it says it here even. So I've seen people stuff it up. That's why they couldn't get their ones working in that regards and whatnot, you know what I mean? And lower stripe sizes tend to be for server systems. Higher stripe sizes tend to be for multimedia computer systems used mainly for audio and video editing. Okay, so if we have a look here, you can see there's the amount of options which are available. So default, or regardless of default, 128 should be connected. Okay. I don't care what other people say, that's what it says there, and that's how it actually works. Other people have been wrong. And when the capacity megabytes for item is selected, enter the RAID volume capacity that you want and press enter. In this case, the default value indicates the maximum allowed capacity, so go for the maximum allowed capacity. When you create a volume, press enter to create the RAID volume and return to the Intel Storage Technology menu. So yeah, that in turn should be the case, and what that will allow is it'll come back to you and you'll see I believe you need to reboot, and then you'll see the applicable drives connected. It wouldn't be wrong to restart from that moment on. It talks about deleting as well and whatnot, so make sure that you've got this RAID guide available, okay guys? And to reiterate, essentially you're installing, in my case, I was Intel Virtual RAID on CPU FOS. The steps are exactly the same, so it looks slightly different. Create a RAID volume, okay? And you just go through these processes. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. They just like to call it something else. And here it's got different forms of RAID being enabled. We're just going for a striped RAID, RAID 0 stripe, RAID 0 stripe. There it is, again with the kilobits and whatnot. It's going for the same information, and what you're going to find is that there is a fault in this where it's going to repeat. So don't worry about the option ROM utility, that's deeper in the BIOS itself, okay? If you're going along my way. If you're looking at installing it as a boot drive, this is a section that you're going to have to read through as well, okay? You may need to install some drivers and whatnot, okay? And then you'll be able to activate the partition and select it as the boot drive when you're installing the operating system, okay? And it's got AMD RAID configuration and whatnot as well. This didn't apply to me then, it may apply to you. May be quite similar, but I'm not going to get into that. We're dealing with Intel today specifically, okay guys? Okay, so after everything, you've restarted, the drives are initiated, you can go back into the BIOS and double check. So you should be aware, if you've not a novice, then you would have more than likely installed drives before. Once done there though, you have to go into disk management in Windows and just make sure to initiate the drive just like you would any other drive. Initiate it, and it will have them all bundled together. So it'll bundle them together and you'll have that one drive. That's in disk management in Windows. So once you're in, if you're seeing it in BIOS and you're not saying in Windows, then you should have done that, but you should be aware of how to do this stuff by now if you're at this stage and doing things like this. If you're doing it all at once, then congratulations, you're learning a lot very quickly. Just take your time and enjoy it. Okay guys, with that being said, you hopefully got a fresh use operating system. You want to shut down all applicable non-essential applications that you might have running. Make sure everything is updated and whatnot. All your drivers are updated in general. It's just good protocol and practice to begin with, and then you can get a program, if you like, called Crystal Disk Mark, and I've got Crystal Disk Mark 7. I haven't changed it since I got it. Go for 64-bit one. You'll get the 32-bit one as well. I'll give a link in the descriptions below for that application so that you can test out your RAID array as well and see how it's functioning. I believe you might need to unpack the file, so then just use WinRAR. Otherwise, once that's done, you don't have to install anything. You just have to literally hit disk mark 64. The application will open. Okay, so we'll go back and I'll show you guys a closer look. So disk mark 64, and you just open it and you'll get it at default. This is what it looks like at default. You can see that I've got that 1 terabyte drive in there, which is two 500 gig NVMe's. We could do a speed test on that, but that's not what we're here for. So I'll pull up the benchmarks from a year past and I'll show you what I was getting with the 3 drives connected. So just going through, that was me doing FX Black 8350 CPU overclock. I was starting from 4.6 gigahertz on all cores, actually, on a side note, and we're trying to go up. I had so many problems I was trying to do a live stream and I had so many problems that were going wrong. I couldn't understand it. As soon as I turned it off, of course, just like, you know, the problem you have where you then take it to the mechanic and the mechanic can't find an issue was the opposite I had on stream to when I got off. Here is one of the tests. Okay, I did that and I only got 8,000 megabits a second or so. There was an issue. I realized I had the drive running at that time. Okay, you put the application in the actual drive itself to get the most accurate results, and what you should receive is something along those lines, providing again you're not utilizing any additional of the drive's bandwidth. Okay, keeping that in mind, again, if we look back to and that's an amazing result. Okay, 10,000 megabits a second is, now if you look at Gen 4 drives and their maximum read and write speeds, okay, you then understand that getting two 500 gig NVMe Gen 3 drives will give you what we had, essentially the 7,000 megabits a second speeds that I had before. Okay, and 3 of them are going to give you 10,000. So 3 500 gig drives at 1.5 terabytes in total. How much that costs you in comparison to a Gen 4 1 terabyte drive? What are the speeds you're getting from the Gen 4 1 terabyte drive, sequentially speaking, of course, if you're going for that large number? And this is what you're getting from 3 of those. With 4, you'll get even more. Okay, your board has to be compatible. So with all that covered, I hope you guys got a better rounded view as to how to actually go about installing your Hyper M.2 x 16 card version 2. Everything that isn't exactly explained to the precise mannerism, those manuals are there for that purpose, okay? If I went through everything exactly, it'd be another 20-30 minutes, and I don't want to keep you guys any further, and I don't want to bore you guys with any more stories that I have. Oh, there was one more thing on a side note. I've seen results and they look fabricated, so just be wary when you're looking at people. I've seen people use 660p Intel NVMe's, and their maximum read and write potential is approximately 1500 or something like that. For 3 drives, for example, in the NVMe RAID, they had 10,000 megabits a second. That's not possible. So I saw then also postings, for example, in that example, that it took about 3 months for them to put the third part out of the installment on how to do this. And it's really shonky, because I've got a feeling that he could never get the Intels working, or he wasn't happy with the speed and performance differential, or he didn't get it working. And what he did get working was a replacement, because the only drives at that stage, at that period of time, that were that speed and were capable of hitting those markers were these drives. Okay, guys? So be warned, do your research, and again, thank you. So on a side note, for example, one of my SSDs, okay, will run at approximately, so your SSD on the other hand, let's get a larger picture of that, will run at 457 or thereabouts megabits a second. So that's the SSD. A single drive, to reiterate, 3500 megabits a second sequentially speaking. We got figures to around 7,000, and with 3 at the almost 10,000 mark. In theory, we should be hitting 10,000. There's always some little discrepancies in your system that are going to affect the speed of the score itself. So yeah, I also have currently 2 SSDs. So if we go into disk management, I can show you that there's a D drive as well. That's a gigabyte. That's 2 500 gigabyte SSDs, okay, as well as our boot, which is the 2 NVMe's off the motherboard itself. And I'll just go to C drive, crystal disk mark. So this is why I'm not getting those scores, because I haven't got the program in the drive itself. It just makes that little bit of difference and latency, because the program has to go off drive onto and back onto. It's not on the drive, where the distance is in theory shorter for it to be read and write to the program. Do you understand? Okay, so otherwise we would have got figures of about 10,000 definitely back then. I was not aware of that at the time, or not thinking about it in that way. What we will do is I'll show you guys the D drive, and that's 2 SSDs, and what you can expect if you're doing something similar. You can set them up in RAID 0 as well. So I'm going to fast forward or just take us there instantaneously. And we're just going through the last test, preparing the random write. I didn't bother closing any of the applications and whatnot. As you can see, even the screensaver, essentially, if you can call it that, is running in the background. But what we see here on the 2 Samsung SSDs, we've got some really decent scores as well, where they give you a certain amount. At half that, it's literally doubled. So that's another cost-effective way that you can raise your, without even getting NVMe's, you can raise, and I'll show you that right now. For example, if you're interested, you right click here, you go into disk management, then you'll have both SSDs connected. So you do this in Windows, okay? And it's very simple. You have both connected here. You'll right click on them, and you'll want to form a dynamic drive, I believe, and you will stripe it, okay? You're striping RAID 0, striping RAID 0, connect it up, activate it, and you will also get the luxury of something like that too. And you can get two 2 terabytes, for example, and have a 4 terabyte drive. Understand one major thing, that if one of those drives fails, the whole RAID array will fail. You'll lose everything on both drives in that case, or 3 drives, or 4 drives for that matter. Understand this? That means that, say with 2 drives connected in RAID array, there's twice the amount of chances of failure. But don't let that fool you, okay? That's what they want you to think. Because when there's one drive, it's twice the amount chance of failure. But when there's one drive and it fails, it's 100% chance failure. It's the same thing, okay? It's just the same thing, okay, guys? So don't be freaked out by RAID array 0. Enjoy doing this. Take your time. Make sure you read the manuals. And yeah, to be brutally honest, I appreciate you guys immensely, all the likes, follows, and subscribes. So the links are at the top there, also in the bottom description. So please smash that like button if at all this was helpful to you. And with that being said, this is Robbi Astral from Robbi Tech, signing out. Peace.